Ever since I was a tiny child, I've enjoyed learning about math and science in my free time. It has caused me to become quite knowledgeable in a large amount of rather niche topics. Of all these topics I've learned over my years online, the one that's interested me most by far has been geometry. What can I say? I like the funny shapes. This often leads me down long rabbit holes of pointless information where I come out the other end knowing nothing that will actually help me. But I do enjoy them immensely. And normally by the end of them, I'll have at least gained a surface level understanding of whatever topic it is that I'm studying. Sometimes though, that won't happen. The most prominent example of this is the 10-hour Wikipedia deep dive special, which I've been very known to do, especially when I'm bored, especially during class. A few of my teachers know this by now. So, by the end of it, I normally come up with something minorly useful, with the exception of one thing: Coxeter elements and their related subjects. I've slowly been driven mad over the last 3.5 years trying to understand what the hell these things are. Pardon my language. So please enjoy the results of somebody who is not trained in math trying to understand what the hell a Coxeter element is. Alright, this might be a tad long, so bear with me. I decided to commit learning to this following a research project I had to do for one of my college classes. Hi professor, I know you're watching this. For the actual paper, it ended up being less related to Coxeter elements and more about just learning in general, because that's a bit easier to write an actual argumentative paper on. But in terms of what was driving my passion for the project, it was Coxeter elements. I hoped that by forcing myself to learn about them, I would eventually be able to say, yep, I know what those things are, and I can basically explain them. Unfortunately, all this did was further drive me mad, as you should hopefully see by the end of this video. So, what on earth is a Coxeter element? What on earth am I on about? Great question! I learned about Coxeter elements when I was studying higher dimensional geometry, which is something I greatly enjoy. So, namely, it was on the 5-cell page. So, every shape has something that you can do to it called orthographic projection, basically removing depth from it. For example, if you take this cube, this Rubik's cube I have with me, if you look at it corner-wise, it actually becomes a hexagon. So, in 3D, generally there's only one, maybe two orthographic projections that make sense. When I was on the 5-cell, I noticed that there were 3. Odd, because I haven't seen anything like that before. So I assumed, must be 4 dimensions. Neato. Labeled with each of these was not a Coxeter element, but rather a Coxeter plane. Now, I should probably say, Coxeter was a dude, so his name is going to be showing up a lot. He was very important in geometry, from what I can understand. Like, actually, I'd heard his name before. Namely, in Iamthong, there are 48 regular polyhedra, where he's a namesake, or at least partial namesake, of the Petrie-Coxeter polyhedra. So, hey, something familiar. That's cool. Hopefully it'll make it easier to understand. I decided to follow the link, and it landed me on the page for Coxeter elements. And here's the quote from Wikipedia directly. For a given Coxeter element W, there is a unique plane P on which W acts by rotation by 2 pi over h. This is the Coxeter plane. To put it bluntly, this did not clear things up at all. This only confused me more. Now, in addition to being confused what a Coxeter plane was, I was also confused about what a Coxeter element was. And also, now I'm gonna have to deal with a bunch of things that sound really similar. That's great. Up on the top of the page, it called a Coxeter element a irreducible element of the Coxeter group. And that scared me, because I suck at group theory. I've tried to understand it before. I don't. It is really hard for me to wrap my mind around. And then I came to the realization that notation seems really similar to a lot of group theory notation. Maybe that'd be helpful? Who knows? So at this point, when I first was researching, I decided to throw in the towel and wait till I knew a bit more, because as a reminder, I was in 9th or 10th grade when I started doing this. This is well beyond what I'm supposed to be learning, and so finding information on it was hard. I wasn't built for it yet. This September, a few years after that, I decided that I was going to write this paper and also make this video, and finally learn what on earth these things are. First order of business was figuring out how I was going to learn. You need a plan. I had to balance learning about Coxeter planes and the related topics with writing the actual paper that I had a grade for, which in turn that's functionally my final. So I don't half-ass that one. That would suck. First section was learning about Coxeter elements. That's for fun. Second section was learning about, the things needed for my paper. That's important. That's grades. Grades are important, guys, I think. Working from what I have. Coxeter groups are a type of group found in group theory, I think, and so have a notation associated with them. Maybe if I can learn to read said notation, it'll make things easier for me. That generally has helped in the past, for example with Rubik's cubes. I decided to start Googling. That's how you start research and stuff. And then I ran into a video from a YouTuber who I've already seen. The Coxeter systems. I wonder if that's useful. So it turns out, Coxeter groups and Coxeter systems have similar looking notation, they aren't related from what I can tell, or at least they aren't directly related. Their notation is different. The notation is different from group theory, and there's another similar thing called Dinkin diagrams, which have another notation that looks really similar, but is different again, meaning that even if I find information, I can't tell if it's referring to Coxeter groups or anything else. So that was a fun realization. I tried to understand the Wikipedia page. However, it started talking about stuff like eigenvalues, which I also don't know. Once again, I'm not built for this. I'm not even majoring in math. So at this point, I decided to throw in the towel again for the time being. I will be, hopefully, attempting to understand it once I have hopefully gotten access to an actual mathematician who knows what they're doing, and not some dingus with too much time on their hands. But I can say I did learn some stuff. So this is going to tie back into my paper, which once again means that, hey, this video is also part of the assignment. I did not learn much related to that other than Coxeter systems. I learned about those are new. I learned that it's more confusing than I thought it was initially, which is also helpful. I mentioned at the start that I tend to go on Wikipedia deep dives frequently. And I learned that I'm way better at them now. That means that I'm likely going to have an easier time learning stuff. For example, if I'm curious about something, say biology or astrophysics, I know how to search for that now. That's a useful skill. So my paper was on, is learning for its own sake worth your time? Is it worthwhile? And my conclusion is, yeah, extremely. And I think that this is demonstrated because even though this was functioning just bashing my head against a brick wall for an entire, 3 or 4 years, I now know how to search things on Wikipedia. One of the greatest, just general sources of information. Also, sources on Wikipedia are amazing. Use them more. Even if I didn't actually learn the thing I set out to learn, I learned how to learn. But not 3 times fast. Yeah, in the future, go study stuff for fun, even if it's not all that helpful. Closing remarks, I suppose. Thanks for listening to my nonsense. I apologize if this was hard to follow. I'm kind of just talking at this point. If anyone has any information on who I might contact to learn more about Coxeter systems, Coxeter groups, Coxeter elements, group theory, set theory, anything like that, comments exist for a reason. Thank you very much if you have anything there. I am also a tiny channel, and so comments, I believe, boosts in the algorithm, so thanks. That'd be cool if you did that. I might make more content like this in the future. I might make completely unrelated content. I have a whole backlog of poor quality streams if you'd like to watch those. I don't know why you would, but they're there. If I can fully understand Coxeter groups, I would like to make a multi-hour long just info dump of all the bullshit I've learned online. Just all the geometry and mostly geometry, honestly. I like geometry a lot. At this point, I'm rambling. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, night, whatever. Peace.